thank you all for being here tonight. I really appreciate you coming out and listening to all of the connections that I have found between the folk song genre and the classical vocal genres. And also just to discuss the benefits in the vocal repertoire. I was committed to researching Stephen Mark Kohn the day I listened to him in the car, actually on my way home from MSU. I was so moved by his musical engagement of the text through his use of tone painting that I actually forgot that I was listening to his music. I really felt like I was experiencing the story of our American heritage. My decision to present this topic relied heavily on the fact that there is little research about Kohn and about this art song set. Kohn received his bachelor degree in composition from Kent State University and went on to earn a master's degree in composition at the Cleveland Institute of Music. But his musical foundation was not like most composers we know today. He grew up in the suburb of Cleveland, Ohio, learning about 60s pop folk, country music, jazz, music theater, anything but classical music. He didn't really have that experience, but he could transcribe anything he heard onto the piano. And he had an incredible ear. And by the time that he was 18, he actually learned where middle C was on the piano and was encouraged to pursue a music degree in college. But he could not read a note at all, but he had an incredible ear. While Kohn may not be a well-known composer, he is a highly versatile musician and has been awarded for compositions ranging from TV commercials to opera. Anywhere in between is art song, and he's underscored children's book series for PBS, composed music for guided imagery and meditation for a company known as Health Journeys. He's also held a position as the director of the electronic studio at CIM from 1998 through 2019. One of the perks of researching a living composer is just that, and having the opportunity to interview him. I had the privilege of interviewing him this past October. I had naturally prepared a list of questions, scholarly questions. I was totally prepared, but then the moment I got on the phone with him, it felt like I was just talking to a friend over a cup of coffee in my kitchen table. He was just fantastic to talk with and work with, and he was just a plethora of knowledge. And it was just so fun to share all the connections that we have with music and our American heritage. He really feels a personal connection to folk songs because of how they came into existence. It actually reminds him of how naturally and unassuming he started his own musical path. When asked what his motivation was for writing the set, he referred to a time when he heard Copland's "I Bought Me a Cat" for the millionth time on stage, and at that moment he knew that the folk song genre needed more representation on the stage and also would be a valuable addition to the vocal repertoire. Much like himself, the majority of the folk writers and singers were inspired by their own environment. As I mentioned, Kohn's musical foundation was informally built from listening to pop folk music and everything else. Now he's come full circle with his American folk song set. He felt that it was time to circle back around to his foundation, saying that what we learn from the age 3 to 18 is our foundation. We build on that foundation in college. Then, when we're mature enough, we have the choice to allow ourselves to circle back around to our foundation that has naturally become our passion to continue to build. Kohn was not the first person to research the history behind American folk music. There are many others who have come before Kohn who also shared his passion. When he began researching the John and Alan Lomax collections as well as the Carl Sandburg collection, his goal was to find selections that were unknown to him and that could also provide a well-rounded representation of our American heritage. John and Alan Lomax and Carl Sandburg were pioneers, not only when it came to the physical act of collecting the folk songs, but also the depth of understanding cultural and musical equity. The Lomaxes recorded over 10,000 songs. An article by Michael Corcoran in the Texas Highways says that the Lomax family treated cultural equity with the utmost importance, saying that, quote, "Music made on the street corner, or a front porch, or a prison yard was as valid as that of the world's greatest symphonies," end quote. If we want to see the lines between classical and folk genres dissolve, composers, like Kohn, must have the desire to pursue them and have skills to improvise with ornamentation and harmony so that the harmonic structures in the musical forms can be more aligned with the classical genre ideals while still maintaining the authenticity of the folk songs. Kohn began composing during the postmodernism time in music history. This is a movement beginning in the 1920s when composers like Arnold Schoenberg and Charles Ives were trying to dissociate themselves from the traditional musical theories and tonal practices. As a result, it created a disconnection between the audience and the artist. That was, in fact, the goal. The stranger and the more innovative it was, and the less the audience liked it, the better the composer was. They called it art for art's sake. Basically, tonal music was out, and atonal music and unconventional harmonies were in. Kohn expressed in his interview that his musical contemporaries and his mentors encouraged this style of writing, but he absolutely wanted nothing to do with it. He believes that the most important thing that you can do as a composer and a lyricist is to immediately connect to your audience. Otherwise, the story is lost. Folk songs are harmonically diatonic, simple and direct, which allows the story to come through very clean. He says, "I've always loved the storytelling aspect of folk songs. The fact they skip past all the academic training, they are rooted in human experience. I like the fact, too, that there's a natural musical quality about them. The tunes are great, the lyrics are funny, so they really emanate from people with talent and an expressive capacity who are out there living a sort of rough and tumble, real life." Kohn also expressed with me that his objective for writing these folk songs was to, quote, bridge a gap between serious and popular music. They are legitimate for the concert stage and straight enough for the non-musician's appreciation, end quote. This set has also gained critical acclaim by many scholars, saying that Stephen Mark Kohn has created a wonderful set of folk song arrangements that are fully concert-worthy. They would provide a fine group for any recital program. With his insight of telling stories, he structured each set loosely off of Copland's own Old American songs in terms of tempi so that it resembles the dramatic arc within the story. Each volume was written between the years 2000 and 2006 and are now all in one publication by the Shermer Music Company. Here I've highlighted 7 out of the 15 songs that I feel give a well-rounded representation of the entire set today. Before I begin highlighting the specific ways that Kohn has musically enhanced these stories, I would just like to give a brief history of each type of song and its origin. Several of these books list folk songs in different categories using language from that time period. Irish and British songs were referred to as white religious songs. The first song, 10,000 Miles Away, is a sea shanty and bush ballad written by British whaler Joseph Joe Gagan in 1778. A sea shanty is a work song that describes life on a large shipping vessel and was inspired by the distance between workers and families that they had to leave back home. A ballad, or white religious song, was sung by settlers who traveled from England, Ireland, and Scotland that shaped Appalachian music in America. These eventually evolved into different types of ballads, such as bush ballads, tragic ballads, or hymns, and were often accompanied by the acoustic guitar, banjo, and the fiddle. Down, Down, Down is a work song that fits under the category of an industrial barroom ballad. Work songs have several categories to them. This particular one is a mixed category between the work songs and the white religious songs. The industrial work song implies that it's a song about a miner, about their work. It's a ballad because of its Irish-British origin, and it gets its barroom name for its swinging rhythm that resembles actually workers coming hungover to work from the night before. It was written in 1918 by William Bill Keating, that you see here, and recorded by him in 1946 during the time when he worked in Pottsville, Pennsylvania, mining for anthracite coal, or what is known as hard black coal. Ocean Burial originated as a poem written by Reverend Edwin Hubble in 1839 that was called The Ocean Buried. It was notated into a song, Ocean Burial, in 1850 by George N. Allen. This song is a cross-cultural song as well, and is considered a cowboy tragic ballad, mainly because it gained its popularity when it was adapted in 1910 under the title of The Dying Cowboy. As the name suggests, cowboy songs were written and sung by men working on the prairie or out west. The old woman's courtship was first known as the deaf woman's courtship, and you will learn why when Paige and I perform this. This origin is British-Irish and found in the Appalachian region. This is a ballad and also categorized as a nursery rhyme, with its song contemporaries being familiar tunes like Go Tell Aunt Rhody or Oh Dear, What Can the Matter Be? Hell in Texas is a cowboy ballad written by John R. Steele, a United States signal corpsman around the turn of the 20th century. This is a ballad, and Kohn also incorporates the next song in the collection called Arizona to round out the story in his own arrangement. The Farmer's Cursed Wife is an English ballad written in 1792, based on a poem by Robert Burns. The lyrics have appeared in several different melodic tunes, one actually being Henry Purcell's opera, The Beggar's Opera. Henry Purcell did not write this, but he just used this tune in The Beggar's Opera. On the Other Shore is an unknown American ballad that has evolved into a hymn. It was sung around campfires through the southern United States. It was sung around campfires throughout the southern United States by traveling preachers. It has also been given titles like I Have a Mother Gone to Glory, Calling the Mourners, and Over Yonder's Ocean. Now, before we look into the 7 songs in detail, I want to spend a little time talking about the differences and the similarities between art songs and folk songs. Folk songs and classical art songs have their differences and each have their own place within scholarship. Art song composers set poetry to music, which is a complex form of prose and is also known for its symbolism. They require formal vocal and piano training and have more complex harmonies. Folk songs are stories handed down through generations that were never written down until it was finally recorded by classical musicians who could notate them. They are simple and direct in form and harmony and do not require a trained musician to sing them. They are not entirely unrelated when we consider their themes. They do have similar themes of love, longing, death, and happiness, and an occasionally joke here and there. Kohn has created the symbolic element that art songs have in these folk songs through his use of chromaticism, harmonic and rhythmic structure, articulation, and performance practice so that they would have a respectable place in music pedagogy and on the concert stage, while still preserving their authenticity and intent. I will highlight various examples of how he uses these elements of tone painting to bring the text to life. But now for the fun details, my favorite part. 10,000 Miles Away is a story about a man sailing on a government ship from England to what feels like 10,000 miles away from his family. Kohn has brought this song to a completely new emotional level. I've highlighted some examples to show how he uses meter, melodic and rhythmic lines as tone painting to create the symbolism that the classical art song has. The traditional recording that I'll show you in a minute is a happy jig of sorts that is the complete opposite of, as far as mood-wise, than Kohn's arrangement. Here's the original.
Over a brave and a gallant ship and a fast and favoured breeze, a bloody crew and a captain to carry me over the seas, my boys to a tune not far away. She's taking a trip on a government ship 10,000 miles away.
Okay, now for Kohn's version. Kohn chooses a slower tempo and changes the meter to 6/8 to represent the rocking of the boat. The purple example you see here on the first page shows how he uses duple meter in the piano against triple meter in the vocal line, when the lyrics talk about a bully crew and a captain true to carry me over the seas, which tells me that there was probably a little bit of tension on that boat. I'm sure that they were on the boat for months at a time, and duple and triple meter fight against each other. And so you'll hear it in our performance how I will have duple, Paige will have triple. The second example shows how he uses rhythm and melody to create sound images of the ocean waves. I've indicated blue phrase markings to show the small melodic movement going down in stepwise. This is within a larger stepwise pattern that I've marked with pink squares. The 3-note phrasing gives a sense of smaller and calmer waves near the boat, but as he looks out, we can feel that he senses the enormity of the ocean and also the unknown of his journey ahead, indicated by the pink squares. They're the same notes, but the pink squares are elongated. So the blue notes are dum, da-dum, dum, da-dum, and the pink squares is dum, dum, dum. And you'll hear that also in our performance. The third example on the page is the same rhythm and melodic movement, but he has expanded the distance between the register of the piano from the top example. He's condensed the rhythm to dotted 8th, 16th notes within the larger intervallic leaps, creating a feeling of gusting winds. So now it's smushed together and you feel the yum, da-da, yum, da-da, yum, da-da, which you will also hear. There are many tone painting examples that I can highlight. The last one that I think that is important to note are the last 2 chords here. They're just 2 A-flat major chords, but the first chord is barely an octave apart between the left hand and the right hand. The second one is a little over 4 octaves apart between the low A-flat and the high A-flat. So this is a symbol that symbolizes the distance between the people that he loves and the work that he has to go to. Also, pedagogically, this song presents possible balance issues between the ensemble. The melody sits mostly in the vocalist's mid-range, along with a full piano texture that is constant 16th notes and counter melodies that go above and below the vocal line. So knowing when to sing and when to support is an important skill to learn as a collaborative pianist. Down, Down, Down is a story about a boy who lives in a mining town. His dad, who is a miner, begs him not to go up to Oak Hill Mine, but the boy does anyway, and the dad doesn't want him to go up because he knows that if he does, he'll stay there, the guys will drag him in, they'll romanticize it and say that it's the best job ever, and it has honesty in his work, and his dad has been a miner, and his grandfather has been a miner, so now it's your turn to be a miner, and that's exactly the last thing that his dad wants for him. So here, Kohn has not changed the melody or the rhythm, but he sets up the subconscious psychological weight that accompanied these miners on a daily basis with his choice of using the low E-flat octaves throughout the whole first page. Here's an example of that. Creates the depth, mentally and physically. Kohn has also used harmonic modulation and chromaticism to separate the verses, indicated by the pink example down here. The second verse is modulated and now begins in G minor, which is a third above the original key. Minor typically symbolizes sadness or anything but happy, and this could possibly, be the sadness of the fate of his son, or disappointment of disobeying his father, and maybe the disappointment of the father knowing what's ahead for his son. Here you see that he also uses disorienting chromaticism at the top here that brings to life the muddled feelings of the job and possibly the feeling of hungover miners that are being lowered down. I can't imagine being hungover and having to go down into the earth. Not that I've ever been hungover, but I can't imagine the feeling. So to me, this puts the audience it puts the audience in a miner's life questioning whether this is the last time that he is being lowered down. The tone color and the vocalist, the tone color of this disorienting feeling is just confusing, I guess. This last example here, this puts the audience in a miner's life questioning whether this is the last time that he'll be lowered down. To me, the tone color that the vocalist creates by not using vibrato gives the sense of uneasiness and a tense feeling that the minor might have experienced. I've also included Bill Keating singing Down, Down, Down. Pay attention to the inflection and the rhythm of the verse in the original version to realize that the rhythm is actually complex and the rhythmic inflection that musicians had to notate when they heard these recordings.
When I heard the voice of my daddy to me, stay out of the mines, take my warning, said he, or would just you'll be choked in a pauper, you'll be broken down, down, down.
The Ocean Burial is a story about a young gentleman trying to console his bunkmate, who has become deathly ill on the shipping vessel. The bunkmate desperately pleads for a burial on land near his family, but subconsciously knows the policy that if you pass while you're on the boat, you are buried at sea. He creates this depth of the ocean by using a slow, stepwise choral sequence, colored by harmonies that allow us to visualize the tragedy of someone sinking into the never-ending darkness of the ocean. In the first example, Kohn used a slow, planing harmony in a descending chromatic fashion that includes the word deep, that symbolizes the depth of the ocean. Another example is his decision to end the song a cappella. During our interview, I told him that it reminded me of the movie Titanic. How many of you have seen the movie Titanic? Probably everybody in this room. Okay, good. You'll know what I'm talking about then. So when the boat hits the iceberg, the quartet is playing, trying to keep everybody calm, then ends up dismissing, the lead violinist dismisses the rest of the quartet and plays alone. He plays Nearer, My God, to Thee, which is symbolic because all of those people are a little bit closer to God. But he's playing it alone. And so that symbolizes the loneliness of being on that ship, nobody knowing anything. And it's a cappella, you're alone with your thoughts. And I asked him if he was inspired by this, and he said, actually, I hadn't thought about that, but he was absolutely thrilled the fact that I had, because that was exactly his intent for arranging these songs, is to make that connection with the artist, make that connection with the audience. It doesn't matter if he didn't connect to that, but I did, and he was just head over heels. So yay, Titanic. The Old Woman's Courtship is a humorous story of a man courting a woman. He begs her many times to spend time with her. The answer is always no. No, 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 you're not asking it correctly. But the last time he does ask it correctly, and you will understand why when we perform. This is an excellent song that can be used to teach developing singers how to incorporate different colors in their vocal production, as well as character analysis and presentation. The melody in the first two measures of the vocal line also presents two pedagogical elements that present issues with text stress. The melody on woman is written with a dotted 16th eighth note figure, with the lower note being on the first syllable. The tendency is to emphasize the wrong syllable because of the interval movement is going from a lower to a higher pitch, and the rhythm is shorter on the first note. So the tendency is to go woman, woman, but it really has to sound like woman, woman, and it's difficult to do that. This movement happens throughout the song and gives an opportunity to recognize and develop ways of managing this. As well as the piano. Sometimes the piano is doubling the vocalist, and the pianist can't do one thing and the vocalist does the other. So there's that combination of ensemble collaboration. This is a humorous song, but it's only funny if the vocalist has the ability to change vocal tone depending on which character is speaking. Here's an example of the two characters that are represented in this song.
Speak a little louder, sir. I'm rather hard of hearing.
Okay, so he asks many questions, and she always says no. Hell in Texas is a song about the devil making a deal with God over some land in Texas. God warned him that the land was bad. It was even too bad for hell, but did the devil listen? No. when does the devil ever listen to God? Never. So he didn't care what he had to say, and he started to create hell in Texas. This also serves an important pedagogical tool for vocalists to develop confidence in stage presence through the characters they are representing. The ensemble develops ways to communicate through articulation, vocal tone, and mannerisms. As in music theater and film, a composer will often write a musical theme for each character or a leitmotif that foretells the audience whether it's a villain or a hero or a child or a memory, and then that leitmotif is assigned to that person throughout the film. He does that here, where in the piano, the devil is represented by the interval of a tritone. And often in music, we call a tritone the devil's interval, because it's very difficult to find one note from the other and opposite. I'll play. That's a tritone. You wanna, when you're singing, you often want to go here, or you want to go here, but you never really want to go here. So it's often hard to find. So we call it the devil's tritone. God is represented, or an aerial angelic character is represented by flowing, tonal, and harmonically predictable 16th notes. Both collaborative partners must communicate between each other, between two characters, to develop a convincing representation of God and the devil through a variety of tone colors and stage presence. Now, to the devil's minions. These are staccato. He uses staccatos as articulation to represent possibly the ticking of the clock, because he's working on making hell, and so he's running out of time. It can also represent the little minions' feet going everywhere, trying to figure out, which ones to create next. Or it could represent all the little creepy crawlies that he's inventing. So it's really up to you, how you hear it, make the connection with these staccatos. Now the tendency is to get rhythmically stuck in 2-bar phrases rather than 4-bar phrases, as there are several short sentences within the text. As a vocal coach, it's important to recognize that the piano creates a national autonomy and forward motion for the vocalist to help create longer phrases, if it does become an ensemble issue. Farmer's Cursed Wife is a story about a farmer who is just absolutely fed up with his wife, and wants the devil to take her to hell, actually. And so the devil does, and then finds out that hell doesn't even want his wife and has to bring her back. So the moral of the story is that women are not that easy to get rid of. I'm sorry. But I mentioned earlier that the instruments that commonly accompanied these songs were fiddles, acoustic guitar, and banjo. Here he uses this example. He uses Kohn writes a character of the banjo and the piano, signifying a plucked instrument with upbeat rhythms, as well as the pizzicato in pink here to represent the fiddle. Here's the original banjo, so you have a reference.
There was an old man lived over the hill. If he ain't moved out, he's living there still, singing pa-ding, ding, da-ding, ding, ding, da-ding, ding, ding, da-ding, ding, ding, ding. Well,
as you can hear. Through chromaticism and dragging the wife to hell, he enhances the story through chromaticism to signify that, and also when he drags the woman back up to earth. He uses tempo changes to create different moods. It portrays happiness as well as disappointment. At the top here you see that he has indicated a gulp of air. He's singing diddle-eye, diddle-eye, diddle-eye. He's all happy, the plan worked, and then all of a sudden he sees something in the distance and gulps the air like, well, what is that coming back to me? And then the rallentando here into a prodding, slower tempo of disappointment. On the other shore is a story about the process of mourning the ones we've lost and longing for the day we can finally be together again. This song takes us through many different levels of grief by intensifying levels of harmony. On this page, it doesn't look like the pianist has much to say. However, it gives an ensemble the opportunity to carefully consider the importance and meaning behind the dynamics and the management of text stress and the emotional arc of each phrase and verse. This is a strophic song, which means every verse is the same, but he builds through harmonic and dynamic intensity for each verse to signify the levels of grief and to signify the spiritual journey of the loved ones who are passing to the other side. In the beginning, he indicates a bell tone that could be considered a foreshadowing of gathering church bells. He also indicates right here pianissimo. Well, pianissimo into a diminuendo. Diminuendoing into what? Nothing. What does that signify to you? Disappointment? Disappearance? Trailing thoughts? Residual bell tones? It's really up to you. Kohn's connection between the story and the audience is all said in this song. As you listen today, there will be many moments of connection that mean something completely different to you than it does to us. So here's an example of that diminuendoing effect. He uses, as I mentioned, he uses dynamics to intensifying harmonies for each verse, since each verse is the same melodically. Joyful, he uses forte. It's a level of hopefulness, joyfulness. Here is reflective. He changes the piano register to all treble. It's a reflective mood. Maybe it's a memory. And then finally, in the church bells, it's pure forte octaves, signifying closure, purity, welcoming heavenly bells, confidence in the closure. And some of my final thoughts as I was closing up this lecture for today is I noticed that every time in each verse when he says, "Go to meet her on the other shore," it foreshadows the end because there's a dissonant harmony during every verse when he says that. At the end, the dissonance happens on Savior. That should be pure, but he uses dissonance on Savior. Maybe it's a reality check that you're trying to convince yourself it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And at the end, wait a minute, I'm here by myself. I'm here without her. And the resolution happens on the words on the other shore. Another thought that came to mind is that the song begins in D flat major and then modulates to the end in D major. And D major is known as the Savior's key, which is the same key as Joy to the World. And that hymn, it may modulate throughout the verses, but it always ends in D major. I thought that was an interesting point. Through this process, I've also realized that it's important to challenge pianists to learn how to create a recital theme through song selections. Singers are very accustomed to doing this, but pianists don't do it nearly enough as we should. So I've arranged 7 songs into a story that could potentially resemble a man's life in early America. The sole purpose of American folk song is to tell a story. So I see it fitting to tell my interpretive story. So here goes. See if you can catch all of the songs. The story begins with a young man's first job as a crew member on a government ship that forces him to leave England and his family behind to travel 10,000 miles away. After spending many months on a ship, he finally arrives in America. He finds work in Pennsylvania working as a miner and goes down, 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 mining for anthracite coal. I imagine that he's a young, impressionable man that has had to deal with more than anyone should at his young age. He finds it very difficult to get over the fact of losing his friend and ship bunkmate, who became deathly ill and also forced his hand at preparing an ocean burial for him before even making it to America. But he does grow up, he meets a special someone, an older woman who is quite smart aleck, and knows exactly what she wants. And he's impressionable enough to play the game of courtship. They eventually marry and move to Texas, and he has found a job working as a farmhand that pays pretty good money. He sent word back to his family back in England that he has settled down in Texas with a nice woman who will care for him for the rest of his days. Meanwhile, the devil has made a deal with God to build hell in Texas. The man working as a farmhand has really felt the devil's influence lately at his job and his home, which starts to create a lot of stress in the marriage. The farmer is convinced that the wife is cursed and wants the devil to take her away down to hell. And as we know, building hell is probably not quite as smooth as creating the earth and universe in 7 days. Things are not going well for the farmer. Not only does he find out that hell doesn't even want his wife, the land that he lives on is the worst land in America, and now he's gotten word from England on the other shore that his mother has passed. This wrecks him, but throughout all of his travels that took him to far-off lands, many jobs, and through some of life's toughest hardships, he has not given up on his faith or hope in knowing that he will one day be reunited with his mother in heaven on the other shore. Stephen Mark Kohn has successfully bridged the gap between classical art song and folk song genres through his American folk song set. It is an important addition to the classical repertoire, serving as a pedagogical tool for musicians to develop their own personal sense of musical interpretation and technique while gaining experience in collaborative engagement. It also holds legitimacy for the professional musician that requires a depth of musicianship and a mature historical understanding. Kohn firmly believes that it's important to teach our students to be open to all musical influences because it will only deepen their own musicianship. Someone once told me that music is life, and what we bring to our music is how we respond to life. Change the slide. Okay. These early American settlers connected to that, and I think that we can all learn from them. I hope that you enjoy our performance of selected songs. Man, I didn't realize how emotional this would be. I hope you enjoy our performance. I'd like to ask you to hold your applause until the very end of our performance. But you may give a warm welcome to my friend and collaborative partner, Paige Heidrich. Please welcome her.
Was it